NVIDIA and AMD have launched their 70 class cards, and boy, were they doozies. Here's a rundown from worst to less worst. The NVIDIA RTX 5070. Turns out, no, it does not in fact have 4090 performance. Dude.
What?
Dude, you were there with me when I filmed that little clip where I did the little quip to Austin, right? Or had you joined us yet? I don't think you had. Never mind, I lied. Because we were at the keynote together, but Luke was sitting somewhere else. He had better seats. And then I just went where they shepherded us into the press area where we were like, oh, okay, so I guess we're third-class citizens after the investors and the analysts, because that's what NVIDIA's into these days. Anywho, I didn't have great seats, but I was able to hear Jensen say that the upcoming RTX 5070 at 549 or 649 or whatever, 549, would match the performance of the 4090. And at the time, my camera guy, Andrew, was like, do you want me filming this? I'm like, buddy, we're at a press conference. Everyone and their dog is already filming it, as you can see. So we are contributing literally nothing to the zeitgeist, or however you pronounce that. It is. Thank you.
Zeitgeist.
It's man. I got dunked on for my pronunciation of Wunderkind. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, I said it wrong. Anywho, we are contributing absolutely nothing. Literally anything we record here of the stage is redundant because everyone else and their dog has their cameras out recording it. And number two, what they're doing is completely redundant anyway because NVIDIA is live streaming the whole thing, and you could get a way better quality version of it from YouTube.
The gamer move seemed to be, I think Bitwit Kyle did this and a few other people, but I don't remember who, where they just restreamed the broadcast and stayed home.
Yeah.
And then just commentated over it.
Well,
and got
yeah.
Tons of live viewers. It was very, very successful.
I mean, dude, I told NVIDIA I don't go to press conferences. The only reason I was there was because we were supposed to go get hands-on with the 5090. Anyway, the point is, I was there when Jensen said it, and in that moment, I was like, yo, Andrew, I know I told you that we're not filming anything, but get the camera out, get the camera. I got mic'd up, put on the mic. Okay. And I got that clip. Dude, that clip I'm going to get so much mileage out of that I'll believe it when I see it clip. Because every time NVIDIA says something that is just complete bullshit, I'm going to be able to pull out that clip.
Just pull it out again.
Of me at the press conference for the 5090 launch being like, I'll believe it when I see it. So yeah.
Well, you would have been able to pull it out for every single NVIDIA launch that I have personally seen. So
it's about 20% faster than a 4070, barely nets a single-digit % increase over the 4070 Super. Its 12 gigs of VRAM poses longevity concerns, especially at 4K, and it is pretty much non-existent at retail. While those quick to the punch were able to get their hands on a card, most folks were unable to find them at MSRP, and the more expensive partner cards, even those ones sold out shortly afterward. Adam included a picture from PC Part Picker where there is only one card in stock, and this is a 5070, a card with a $549 MSRP, and it is priced at $1,029 as of 4:20 p.m. March 6th. Nice. Hashtag blaze it. Your money, that is.
Yeah, sweet.
Just light it on fire. Light it all on fire.
Yeah.
AMD, things went a bit better, but it looks like the story is complicated. It was a much better received launch, including by yours truly. The 9070 has the same MSRP as the 5070 from NVIDIA, while being about 9% faster at 1440p and 4K raster. In ray tracing, the 9070 beats out the previous flagship 7900 XTX, which launched at an MSRP of $1,000, but actually fell behind the 5070 in our testing, though other outlets found that it was within 5 to 7% across their suite of ray-traced games. We did notice that the worst performance for the 9070 was in Black Myth Wukong, where it seems AMD is still struggling a little bit. It gets 16 gigs of GDDR6, though, which gives us a little bit more confidence that it will continue to be able to keep up in the future without seeing lag spikes, and was in stock for substantially longer, actually several hours, rather than several minutes. Meanwhile, the 9070 XT competes in performance with the 5070 Ti and AMD's 7900 XTX in raster, and in ray tracing, it competes and even beats the 5070 in several titles. Great card, undercuts NVIDIA's offerings in price, brings ray tracing to a serviceable level, and is generally pretty good. However, oh yeah, FSR 4 looks pretty good. Image quality, no more distracting than DLSS 4, and outlets who have done deep dives into the image quality rated as matching the DLSS CNN model, but lags behind in some areas compared to NVIDIA's latest Transformer model. However, it's not all sunshine and roses for AMD, and there's going to be a number of sources that we're going to be talking about, so stick with me for a little bit here, guys, because there's a lot of sides to this story. Videocards with a Z.com. Oh, that makes sense, because video cards with an S wouldn't exist. Because you'd have to have, like, video cards. Hey, I get it. They were planning for the future. They had a crystal ball when they bought that domain.
Oh, boy.
Anyway, they got a quote from OCUK's Andrew Gibson, who stated, MSRP is a capped quantity of a few hundred, so prices will jump once those are sold through. They also received insight about rebates from Swedish retailer Inet.se, who claimed that MSRP prices will apply to a limited number of cards. The prices only apply to the first shipment of each model. I have a note in here from Adam, who prepared this topic. Linus, can you comment on this sort of rebate behavior? Is this commonplace? My experience in the grocery industry knows that this isn't out of the ordinary, but I also sold jam and shortening, so not sure how that translates. What I will say is this. Back when I was working in retail, demand for the latest GPU was not like it is today. I would say under normal circumstances, yes, there are elements of this launch that would seem pretty wild if you haven't worked in the industry before, but are kind of normal, like the fact that pricing didn't seem to be finalized up until like the hours before the launch. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. That's not unusual. I'm not saying it's good. It's not good. It's absolute madness, but it's not unusual. We would regularly cut POs for literally like hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of GPUs and have no idea what our cost was for them and what our MSRP was going to be for them. Hundreds of thousands of dollars of GPUs, like hundreds of top spec cards. And we literally wouldn't have a price. EVGA wouldn't have a price. And our direct NVIDIA rep wouldn't have a price. They're just like, buy them. This is your allocation. Take them or someone else will take them. And you're like, okay, because what else are you going to do? You don't have any GPUs to sell. What, your computer store with no GPUs is ridiculous, right? So you just take them and that's it. You cut a PO. However, what I will say is that the idea of having a rebate like this, like an instant rebate, because there's different kinds of rebates. Okay, so there's your mail-in rebates. Those are the ones that have the little form you fill out for the consumer, and they mail in the form and they get some money back. The redemption rates on those are somewhere between 10 and 50%, depending on the size of the rebate. The smaller ones tend to have a very low redemption rate, and the higher ones tend to have a much higher redemption rate once you go past a certain number. Don't quote me on those exact numbers. It's been a minute and consumer behavior might have changed a little bit, but the point is just that there's a wide range of redemption, and the people who do redeem it are essentially being subsidized by the people who don't redeem it. That's the way the math works on mail-in rebate. So there's your mail-in rebate, okay? Then there is your kind of point of sale rebate, POS rebate, and that's going to take place at the point of sale. And those are kind of like a commission or a spiff for a salesperson, but it goes at the retailer level. So you're expected to kind of use it for a short-term promotion. And the idea is that you're driving sales during some kind of an event, like March AMD-ness, for March Madness. AMD usually does a basketball themed promo for March Madness, March AMDness. So that would usually have something like a POS rebate across bundles of AMD products or partner products in order to kind of push up the volumes during that time. The last kind would be like a price protection slash like instant rebate. Actually, that's more of a terminology for POS rebate, but like a price protection. So like a credit, essentially a credit, where they are taking your entire inventory that you have and they are price protecting you down to a new, presumably permanent price. And that would happen in the event that you had something like a significant price drop. So I would say the only example of that I remember seeing was when NVIDIA launched the GTX 480. Or 480 GTX, excuse me. I've got my prefixes and suffixes moved around because NVIDIA moved them around. NVIDIA launched that card thinking that it was going to sell, and it didn't. I think that was probably the worst NVIDIA card launch that I saw in my years working at NCIX. We effectively, they were dead in the water on launch day. And so what happened was we had our inventory that we had bought without knowing how much we were paying for it. And we basically went, look, guys, you fucked this. You need to deal with this. And so we got our stock price protected down, if I recall correctly. It may have also been a POS rebate, but one that was like, this is a POS rebate, but the understanding was that it was perpetual to help us get rid of this stuff, and they effectively adjusted the price of that thing. So, with all of that in mind, the idea of a new card arriving and some portion of my inventory being instant rebated as like an introductory promo, knowing that some of my inventory would jump back up to a higher price after the fact. No, I have never seen that before. And I consider that to be, if that is indeed what is happening, there is more to the story, which we'll get to. But if that is indeed what is happening, I consider that to be extremely disingenuous, because that is not reflective of what the long-term situation is going to be. That's an introductory promo. That is not an MSRP. And if you're not enabling, and I can tell you, again, from working in retail and knowing that this hasn't changed, I can tell you that the margins are not there to support selling this thing at $599. So I'll use the XT as my example. The margins are not there to support selling this at $599 if you need an instant rebate to get there. You make like 6 points on a GPU. Like, get real as a retailer. That is, unless you are, well, we'll get to the whole thing where you can have marketplaces sell the GPU and they can be at higher prices and you take a cut of that. And well, I mean, it's not my fault. I didn't price it at that. Anyway, that's a whole other conversation. This is very, very deep, very complicated, and we're just getting started. So I would say the closest thing that I ever saw to the kind of fervor that is going on in the GPU market right now, because I worked there pre-AI boom, pre-crypto boom, right? I would say the 8800 GT was the closest I ever saw. And that was a ripping launch. Like, it basically offered similar, see, he remembers. This guy remembers.
It was a good time.
Anyone who was there for 8800 GT launch remembers, because that thing was wild. It was based on the G92 die, if I recall correctly. So it was a process node shrink compared to the G80, which was the 8800 GTX. That was the top spec card. And this 8800 GT was on this new die that was on a new node. It was crazy power efficient. It clocked crazy well. It was killer. I think it had a little bit less RAM or something like that. Like, it had less VRAM, but it was available in two different configs, one with less and one with more. And you didn't really need the extra VRAM for a lot of modern games at that time. So a lot of people went with the lower priced, lower VRAM one. And it offered bloody near the same performance, this 8800 GT, like non-GTX, and it was like a mid-cycle refresh. The whole thing was bizarre. Near 8800 GTX performance at a fraction of the heat. Therefore, it was a single slot card and at like half the price. Like, it was wild. And if you compared it to the 8800 Ultra, which was barely better than a GTX, but cost way more, the value proposition was like unheard of. Like, people, and remember, SLI was a thing back then and scaled pretty okay across a lot of games that people actually played. So people were buying two of these for like the price of a single 8800 GTX and absolutely curb stomping the GTX in terms of performance. Nobody could keep these things in stock. It was a feeding frenzy. And what happened was, over time, the 8800 GT did go up in price. But it didn't happen like this. It didn't happen that your initial inventory would come in and they would basically have you pay a higher price and then instant rebate you down so you could sell a limited amount of them at that lower price. No, you paid the lower price. And the way that pricing went up was that your next shipment would be at a higher price. So it was up to the retailer to determine, how much they were going to mark it up or whatever. With the manufacturer's suggestions, right? It was up to the retailer how they were going to mark it up, but no one was kind of exercising external control on that card by having you pay a higher price and then enabling the MSRP with a spiff or a discount or an instant rebate or a POS rebate or whatever these mechanisms are. So no, in conclusion, I have never seen what Andrew Gibson and the Swedish retailer are describing. No, I have not. So, let's hear the other side of the story. The Verge asked AMD, can you confirm or deny that the best prices on the best priced cards are capped in this way? And what AMD said is, it is inaccurate that the $549, $599 MSRP is launch-only pricing. We expect cards to be available from multiple vendors at $549/$599, excluding region-specific tariffs and or taxes, based on the work we have done with our AIB partners, and more are coming. At the same time, the AIBs have different premium configurations at higher price points, and those will also continue. Now, that's another thing that is different these days. It used to be that a premium version, and I'm going to use EVGA's lingo, okay? So a KO or a SC or okay, Kingpin's a bad example because those were a lot more expensive. But these premium versions of a card usually didn't encroach or barely encroached on the pricing of the card above them. Nowadays, dude, it feels like you can see like an overbuilt card, like a premium or an overclocked version of a card that literally costs like 30% more. And you're looking at it going like, well, hold on. Shouldn't I just be getting like a completely new class of GPU for this? This is ridiculous. But because the price bands have been so stretched out, like they used to have to fit like your 30 class GPU, your 50 Ti, your 60 Ti, your 70, your 80, your 90, or your Titan, but all of that fit within about $200 to $800, $1,000, right? Well, now, I don't know, we got price bands all the way from like $400 all the way to $2,000. So all of a sudden, you can have a card that's supposed to be $400. You have an overbuilt version of it that's $550 or $600, and you're still like $50, $100 below the next up card. It's ridiculous. So it's really hard to put downward pressure on the pricing of a 5070 when 5070 Ti's are so much more expensive that jumping up to it isn't just a logical step. All right. What else do we have here?
It's a long topic, and that tangent took so long, and it's still such a long topic.
Well, dude, I mean, is it interesting? Because you guys can tell me if you're bored and we can move on. Okay.
People seem pretty engaged.
Okay. Many folks have cried foul on AMD, claiming they are doing evil deeds. Adam's guess is that it's mostly incompetence. I mean, of course, companies are trying to maximize profits. That's what they exist to do. But AMD doesn't sell GPUs out of the goodness of their hearts. But there does seem to be some incompetence, but also maybe some strategic incompetence, because I had another email hit my inbox that Adam didn't have access to that will add a little bit more context to what I'm about to say. So strap in. The pricing was last minute. Hardware Unboxed noted in their 9000 series announcement video that they had prepared multiple conclusions to the announcement because AMD hadn't determined pricing yet. And we did the same thing. We prepared 3 different conclusions for our video, depending on the announced pricing from AMD. That means that this information was likely provided last minute to retailers and even board partners who would have needed to prepare promotional materials, social media posts, signage, advertising, database entries, and more in an extremely short period of time. AMD would have had to communicate to all of their retail and manufacturing partners, provide compensation if prices were being adjusted in the form of rebates or payments. Board partners would have had to reprice all their products, communicate to retailers and SIs and the like. And this scramble leaves a lot of room for errors, like Best Buy listing the MSRP cards as on sale at launch time. AMD has since confirmed this was an error on Best Buy's part because the availability date was supposed to be a day after. Whoopsie doodles. Board partners also deal with razor-thin margins and have a big interest in making as much money as possible from pent-up demand. So the question is, what can AMD do about this? And Adam's conclusion is, not much. Frank Azor from AMD says they will be encouraging AIBs to keep cards at MSRP. And we spoke, and I think that's a little bit disingenuous, personally, because I do believe that AMD can do more than just suggest things. Here's an example of something that AMD could do is if board partners are not allocating enough of their cards to MSRP versions, they could not allocate them GPUs. That is literally the lever. That is the way that GPU makers, and this drives me crazy because I can be kind of pedantic sometimes, and this is a distinction that actually does matter, in my opinion. GPU makers are named Intel, AMD, and NVIDIA. Graphics board, or video card, or graphics card, or add-in board partners, those are the Sapphires, Asuses, MSIs, Power Colors of the world, okay? So that's not a GPU, that's a graphics card. A GPU is the actual silicon die. So that's the leverage that GPU makers traditionally have over their board partners, over the graphics card makers, is that they can basically say, look, play by our rules, or you will either sell at the price that we dictate, or you will sell nothing. Now, there's a problem with that. The problem with that is that then they are exerting a kind of ridiculous level of control over their, partners and really not treating them very well, especially if they don't give them enough margin to survive. See Exhibit A, EVGA, who didn't survive in the graphics card market because they simply, and this is a little bit of conjecture on my part, but simply got squeezed out. There was just not enough margin for them to continue to make it. Now, here's where the story gets where we get a little bit more color commentary on the story. We spoke with a system integrator who had a bit of a different, and I wouldn't say different take, but a more expanded upon take. Their take was basically that all AMD really cares about to call this launch a success is to see big lineups at Micro Center. And we did see some evidence that Micro Center got a huge allocation compared to what was available online. I don't know this for sure, but it does seem like retail. I feel like we've gone back 2 decades. It does seem like retail got the priority for the launch compared to e-tail, compared to online, which, again, you want to talk about things that I don't remember seeing in my entire career. Well, that's one of them. That's wild, dude. That the way to get these products on launch day is that you go line up and buy something in person. So they were pretty frustrated. Their total allocation of 9070 XTs from one board partner that they were able to use in their systems was 3 units. Those units, their cost was over MSRP. So what that tells me is that we are not getting the whole story from AMD, because it's very clear from those retailers telling us, hey, we only have pricing support on a limited number of these cards. And AMD never actually said that the everyday MSRP will be, or the everyday price on these cards will be $549, $599. All they said is that they'll continue to be available. They didn't say in what kinds of quantities, right? So what that tells us is that it takes some kind of spiff or POS rebate or something in order to hit these prices. These are not everyday prices, because if they were, then an SI would be able to buy a card at $570 and make a few points of margin selling it at $599. That would be possible. But what tends to happen when your pricing is controlled via spiff or via instant rebate is that only the large players will have access to that. And so when you go buy something at a mom and pop shop or from a small system integrator, it'll be at a much higher price because they don't have access to any of that. They just buy from a distributor, and the price is whatever the channel price is, whatever the market will bear. Another element that they brought up with us is that, curiously,
one sec. Hovership said his 9070 XT from Micro Center was $1,100.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise you. Okay, how do I say this in a nice way?
Wait, he said $789. What?
Oh, okay.
He said $1,100 and then he said $789. I'm a little confused.
Okay, $789. Okay, that actually ties really well into the next point. This SI contact, who we're not going to name just because we don't want them to get in trouble for giving us this inside baseball. This SI contact pointed out that it's curious that a lot of the cards have ended up kind of for the 9070 XT have ended up in the kind of $720 range, kind of plus, depending on how overbuilt they are. Well, here's something to consider. $599 plus a 20% tariff equals what? $720. And
gotcha.
And here's the thing. When NVIDIA launched their newest generation cards, they didn't know what the tariffs would be. There is at least an argument to be made that NVIDIA did not know that there would be tariffs on their cards impacting the pricing. And don't kid yourself. There are tariffs, and they are impacting the pricing. AMD knew. Before AMD announced their retail MSRP, they knew that there would be 20% tariffs on these cards if they were shipping out of China. And many, many of them are manufactured there. So what it appears to me, and I can't say this for certain, but with all of the evidence that I've seen and with all the experience that I have, what it appears to me is happening here is AMD wanted to undercut NVIDIA on their MSRP, is selling these cards into the market with 20% tariffs on them, knowing that realistically their partners will not be able to hit those prices across the entire inventory that they have, but that they could strategically trickle out a few of them at that price while selling the rest at a much higher price that reflects the tariffs, which they expect customers to simply accept and absorb because GPU prices are so high in the market. It appears to me that AMD has no real intention of actually hitting those prices, but it may not be entirely their fault because AMD certainly didn't start a trade war.
Question. I don't think while you were working at NCX, there was noticeable tariffs, but
no.
Do you know anyone or have any experience with stores that operate during, like, I haven't seen this so far, but would it be normal to display that, like, this is the base price and then it increases by this much because of the tariff? Like, would you explain that to the user?
What would normally happen is if you were a Canadian store, let's say, or actually let's use a Chinese store as a better example.
Sure.
If you were a Chinese store, and by Chinese store, I don't mean AliExpress.com. That's very much owned by Alibaba Group or whatever, right? But like it's very much a Chinese store, but it has an English storefront. Like it is a Western storefront for a Chinese company. So when I say Chinese store, I'm talking like Taobao, like an actual like for Chinese people in China Chinese store. So the way that I would expect them to handle it is if you are ordering from a tariffed country, they would either have some kind of disclaimer that there may be that they're not responsible for any import duties, tariffs, whatever, and then you would be slapped with a tariff bill when it arrives. That's how I would expect that to happen. If you are a retailer and you are buying in bulk from a tariffed source, then I would expect that to simply be bundled into your cost the same way that anything else would be, whether it's freight or transaction fees or whatever else. Like when we were at NCIX, you would have we had kind of like a cheat sheet for what the rough costs would be. So on something like a power supply, I could basically say, as long as I'm ordering in pallet quantities and not in just box quantities, somewhere in the neighborhood of around, over the time that I was there, freight costs went up a lot. So it started at around $1.50, and then went up to probably around $2 to $2.50 per power supply in terms of factoring in your freight cost. So you would just account for that import tariff as part of your import cost of the item, and then you would mark up from there. And that would be transparent to the customer, other than just that the prices suck.
Okay. Fair enough.
So in summary, I don't think that AMD had any intention of these cards being universally available at these prices. Or if they did have an intention, I think that it might have been kind of a misguided hope. Or, I mean, things have gone kind of ping pong back and forth on the whole tariff thing a fair bit. So maybe it was a naive hope then that the tariffs would not be there and that they would be able to hit them. But as it is now,
I don't think they did on China. I think they did on Canada and Mexico.
No, that's right. So as it is now, I think that the more transparent thing for AMD to do would be to say, there are outside factors impacting our costs. We are going to do our best to make sure that there are cards available at these MSRPs. However, it is very clear from these external factors that are impacting our costs to import these cards that not every card will be available at these prices, and we are effectively going to be shifting margin from the buckets on the cards where we're making money down to these deeply discounted ones at MSRP. MSRP is a discounted price. It's a promotional price, as far as I can tell, and I'm deeply disappointed. I was about to say I'm deeply discounted. Yeah.
Speaking of you being deeply discounted, you can take off the hat.
Oh, yeah. Thanks.
No worries.
There we go. That is much more comfortable. Headphones over top of a toque is not my vibe.
Yeah.
Is there anything else?
Questions or next topic?
People bored of this conversation? I can't tell if they were into it or not because I don't have all my chats open. Yeah, it seems like people are all right with it. So, yeah, good luck, everybody.
The discussion questions are pretty good. What is the source of the supply shortage? How are board partners feeling? I'm sure they would much rather be selling more GPUs. And then, do you think NVIDIA and AMD are indulging in scarcity marketing?
No. Well,
I don't think so.
No, I don't think marketing is the primary driver. I think with AMD, their GPU launches have been low volume, and then their post-launch sales have been even lower volume for years and years and years at this point. Like I remember having like a really silly conversation with a viewer at one point where they were like, why don't you ever acknowledge Vega 56? And I'm like, what are you even talking about? I literally like
7 of them.
I pulled up Newegg and I was like, there's one card and it's like an open box card. Like this GPU effectively doesn't exist. What are you even talking about? Or like, no, it wasn't Vega 56. It was Radeon 7.
Well, even Vega, miners bought all of them.
Yeah, but no, Radeon 7 was different. Radeon 7 just wasn't a card. It was this like weird launch thing. AMD made like a few of them with their partners. It was like repurposed dies from some workstation or compute card or something. And then they dropped driver support like immediately for it. Like it was a complete clown show of a product. It wasn't a real product. And people were like, oh, why you don't acknowledge AMD, the Radeon 7? It's like, dude, drop your fanboy shit because I don't care. That doesn't, you're not making sense. You don't make any sense right now. But that's been AMD's situation for years and years and years. I mean, even 7900 series kind of did okay, but that was it. It kind of did okay. I'm not convinced that they made any enormous volume of these cards. Yeah. So if I was AMD and their partners, even if I thought I might have something good on my hands, I'd have like PTSD from how many times I'd been given the smackdown from NVIDIA every time I tried to launch something decent, and have them just like pull another ace out of their butt crack and be like, boom, guess you get to sell nothing. So overbuilding for them, I mean, is risky. You got to think about the numbers involved here. Okay, guys, think about the numbers. If I'm AMD, okay, or let's put ourselves in the situation of a board partner instead, because that's a much tougher one. AMD's margins are going to be better, and their inventory holdings are going to be lower because AMD only holds GPUs. Or in some cases, don't quote me on this, but my understanding, at least on the NVIDIA side, is that they will actually provide kits, like GPU kits, to board partners, and that will include the GPU and the memory. So they may take some margin there. They may actually take on some inventory risk there. Don't quote me on that for AMD or even NVIDIA for that matter. But what I'm saying is that they carry inventory for only part of the finished product. The board partner, they have to take on inventory for the GPU die itself, for the memory, for the power delivery components, the raw PCBs, any connectors and doodads, coolers. Coolers are a very significant expense. So they are holding enormous inventory. There's lead time in terms of building them, packing them, shipping them. So by the time they're actually delivering this thing to a consumer, if all goes according to plan, they have paid all of their suppliers for this stuff. They are effectively probably not able to utilize their net payment terms much. And that becomes even more true the longer this thing sits and rots. So if I'm a board partner and we're talking about a $599 product, I can assume that my bill of materials is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $400 to $450 at least. So let's use $450. If I overbook, right? Like if I overestimate, and I'm a global company, right? So I'm Sapphire, right? I got to supply, if I supply even one single GPU to every computer shop around the world, how many am I making? Right? Hundreds of thousands, millions, you know? We're talking about enormous amounts of money. So if I get it wrong by even 5,000 units, right? That's $2.25 million. I can't get it wrong. And if I'm going to get it wrong, I'd rather get it wrong on the low side, especially if I've been burned time and time and time and time again on building a bunch of these stupid Radeon cards and then nobody freaking wanting them, right? So no, I don't think this is scarcity marketing. I think this is, on the NVIDIA side, them just much rather using these wafers to build AI products. And on the AMD side, I think this is as simple as not buying enough allocation, not buying enough wafer allocation from TSMC. I'm sure AMD would love to be selling more cards, but they've got to book wafers months in advance. They don't know that NVIDIA's 50 series is going to suck back when they're booking launch allocation for production for 9070. They don't know that. They might have, that is awful, by the way. I can pick you up loud and clear. Oh, yeah.
All right, I'll stop.
Yeah, or just lean away, maybe. Anyway, the point is that I don't know. I don't know that NVIDIA is going to lay a huge egg on their 50 series launch. I might have some sort of whispers and scuttlebutt, but I'm not going to know that their pricing is going to suck because NVIDIA probably hasn't even determined their pricing yet. And they certainly haven't leaked it to anybody. We don't find out till the very last minute. So if I'm AMD, I'm going like, oh my God, I don't know how many wafers, because 5080 they might pull a 30 series and just like, boom, try to go after the console market. You guys remember that, right? That's how aggressive NVIDIA can be when they want to be, because they were like, basically, fuck the PlayStation with this Radeon crap graphics hardware in it, fuck the Xbox. 3080 is, I forget what the 3080 MSRP was, but I think it was like $600 or something like that. Like, it was aggressive. And the 70 was so powerful. It was such good pricing, right? NVIDIA can be aggressive. So I don't want to overplay my pathetic, 9070 hand if I think I might be up against NVIDIA's top tier GPU at that price. I have no idea. But then as it turned out, AMD was going to be up against their like fourth tier down, and they were super competitive. So yeah, they might ramp things up, but it's going to take time.